Denver Broncos have a joker in their deck, but Sean Payton hasn't pulled that card. What's going on with the Broncos' free agent acquisition to tight end? We'll break it down and much more here on today's episode of Locked On Broncos.
You are Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Broncos Country? Welcome into another episode, Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Where is Evan Engram? That's a question everybody in Broncos Country seems to be asking here. And Sean Payton, we're waiting for the answer on what is going on with the joker in the deck. We'll break it all down here on today's episode of the show. I'm Cody Roark, Broncos reporter for Mile High Sports, joined as always by Sayre Bedinger, site expert over there, predominantlyorange.com. Thanks to all the everydayers out there in Broncos Country. Thanks for making us your first listen, however you choose to do so. If you're not yet an everydayer, become one today. We'll go through a lot here on today's show. It's going to be a little bit of a mailbag episode as well. We're going to talk about the joker role being non-existent so far through 2 weeks of play here for the Broncos offense. We'll go through also the linebackers becoming a liability in pass coverage and a concerning statistic the Broncos were giving up in Sunday's loss to the Indianapolis Colts. And on top of that, Sean Payton falling on the sword of game management and decision-making late in the Broncos' loss on Sunday to Indianapolis. You'll get all that here on today's show, brought to you by our friends over there at FanDuel. And right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use all across the app. Sayre, let's go to probably the biggest question right now surrounding this team besides the defense, which we'll get to later. Really, it is, where is Evan Engram? What is Sean Payton doing with this joker role that he has been banging the table for since the moment he arrived?
Yeah, he said it was the number one must-have of the offseason, didn't he, Cody? You and I heard that interview that he did with Kay Adams, and he talked about how the joker role, which is an elite receiver at tight end or running back, and we believe Evan Engram to be that guy, not just based on our opinion, but based on what Sean Payton has said this offseason, based on what Evan has said this offseason, what other teammates of Evan Engram in Denver have said this offseason. It's not just an opinion that we think Evan Engram is the joker. He was brought in. He specifically said he was recruited to Denver by Sean Payton to come and play that role. He said in his first interview that he had with the team, Cody, he talked about how that was part of the recruiting pitch to get him to come to Denver, was to play this joker role. And like you mentioned, we just haven't seen it. 6 targets in the first 2 weeks, 4 catches for Evan Engram, and 51 snaps, which is 38% of the offensive work at this point. Now, we have to say the caveat obviously is that he had the calf injury in week 1, so he wasn't available for 100% of the snaps, but less than 40% in 2 games, Cody, seems excessively low for somebody who is supposed to be playing this must-have role for the offense.
And he's a chess piece, too, because if you use him the right way, if you look at how Sean has utilized Kamara back in the day, I mean, granted, the joker role is how it's used is different at running back at times than, you see it with tight end. Like when you go back and you watch Jimmy Graham, you watch how Taysom Hill was used kind of bit as that joker there for him. We have not seen that here with Evan Engram. We're not even seeing those design plays there to him. And granted, some people are saying, well, he was injured, he's coming off the injury. I don't want to hear that as an excuse for Sean Payton, because Evan Engram practiced in full on Thursday and Friday. He was full go. I was there. I watched him. And, for us to sit there in the third quarter and say, hey, how come we haven't seen Evan Engram against the Colts? It's a little problematic there, because he does have a skill set, Sayre. When you talk about when you're facing different linebackers, sure, you want to match him up against a slower not as athletic linebacker. But I think Evan Engram is the perfect guy that you can match up on a very athletic linebacker like a Zaire Franklin of the Colts, to be exact, in this situation here. We didn't see it. Like the routes we saw on crossing routes underneath, we're seeing him on little just releases to the flat, little sit routes there. I want to see Evan Engram used as how Sean Payton has used these other guys that he deemed as jokers, where you're bringing them underneath the formation there because you're capitalizing against a blitz. You find him wide open, and now he can catch it at about 4 to 5 yards. He can take it all the way upfield for about 20 to 30. We have not seen the utilization here in the way that Sean has kind of said that he would like to use a guy like Engram. And I don't think that's an Evan Engram thing here. I want to be very specific with that. I think very much this is a Sean Payton going with, I think, not too many options, but I don't know if Sean knows how to balance all of that early on here in the season. And that's the good news, Sayre. It's only week 2.
Yeah, and it is a balancing act at this point because I think it's kind of like when you open up gifts at Christmas time, you're like overwhelmed by the amount of stuff that just entered your life. If you ever been in that situation or your kids have, it's like they want to use everything all at once. They want to play with every toy, they want to play every video game, they want to unbox and unwrap everything all at once. And you can't just do that. You can't just have everything all at once. You got to go one thing at a time. And so for the Broncos, I think you have to prioritize what's the most important thing, right? And the most important thing is you feel like this was your number one must-have of the offseason. So you've got to allow the offense to be filtered through that. I'm not saying that we sat here and expected Evan to be 100 catch, 1,000-yard player immediately upon his arrival to Denver, but we did expect immediate impact because of how good he is as a pass-catching option. The two targets that he didn't catch, Cody, were nearly intercepted by the opposing team. Week 1 against the Titans, it was Amani Hooker nearly jumped a little out route, pretty much the same route to the opposite side of the field that was nearly jumped by Kenny Moore as well. Just the Colts and the Titans were all over it. It was telegraphed. It's obvious type stuff like you're mentioning. The Broncos aren't disguising things well. They're not getting him involved enough to the point that he's opening stuff for other players. That's what we want to see. We want to see Evan really dictating everything else that defenses are doing, and it's not happening. I don't know if it's because they're overwhelmed by all the different. We want to feed Pat Bryant. We want to get him more involved. We want to use both backs. We want to have Cortland Sutton. He's our number one target. We got to get Troy Franklin. There's so many different things going on, but you're forsaking the one guy who could really make everybody else better.
We've talked so much about the easy buttons for this offense, right? Cortland Sutton being the number one guy. I found it a little astonishing. Only one catch for 6 yards on 4 targets. We talked about the target share of this game in our post-game recap. For anybody who missed it, I feel like you and I gave a pretty raw, like out front, like just explanation and conversation about what the heck happened in this game here. The offense did enough in Sunday's game to win this game, but certainly I think, Sayre, the utilization of certain guys has to be brought into question here because there is no excuse. Like Evan Engram can play on the outside. He can play in the slot. He's been playing in line. He can play offset. So why aren't you doing these things? Like I found it astonishing a little bit. And granted, they have a little bit of a different offensive system in Indianapolis. I think Denver has a wide variety of different playmakers that can make plays and obviously have a positive impact for this team. But how come you're not using a guy like Evan Engram the way that the Indianapolis Colts have seemingly found a way to utilize Tyler Warren? I mean, he was their chess piece, move around guy. Denver's got, I think, the pieces around them to be good. There's no way you should make this offense one-dimensional or make how you use a guy like Engram one-dimensional.
No, and we talked about it in the first before the game, actually, how the Colts got Tyler Warren involved, to your point, Cody, with 10 total touches or 10 opportunities in the first week. And then obviously against the Broncos, he has another 4 catches for 79 yards. We saw him lined up in the backfield, albeit he didn't have success in the one time that they did hand him the ball. But the fact remains that when he was on the field, because you handed him the ball in that situation, even though it was a failure, as in terms of the Broncos stopped it, right? Even though it was a failure, now all of a sudden you're the opposing defensive coordinator is thinking now, okay, he's lined up in the backfield, the ball's going to him. All of a sudden you do something different. Sean Payton knows all these things. Like we're not sitting here saying things that Sean Payton doesn't know about. Oh, well, he could be a decoy for you. Oh, he can move around the formation for you. The problem is the I guess conflict that we're having right now is that through 2 games, we're not seeing it. And that's not acceptable for somebody that you said was your number one must have. I keep repeating that because if it's your must have, you got to prove why it was your must have from the opening. He's a veteran player. He's on a 2-year deal. You didn't draft anybody in a really strong tight end class in this draft. I mean, until Caleb Lohner late. So you could have drafted somebody. You didn't. You could have gone after other free agent options that would have been cheaper. You didn't. You paid Evan Engram. You gave him the bag. So let's go ahead and put that vision into place. Let's get it. We don't want to wait. Maybe that's what it is, Cody. I know somebody wrote us and said maybe he's saving this chip for the Chargers, right? And
yeah, why
if
though?
That's the case. Yeah, why are you doing that? But if that's the case, then okay, no better time than the present. The best time to plant a tree, other than 100 years ago, is today. So maybe that's the philosophy with Evan Engram here in week 3.
I've never heard that before, but I like it. I like it a lot here. Broncos Country, we're going to continue to answer some of your mailbag questions coming up next here. What is going on with the Broncos linebacker position? There's got to be a sense of urgency there. We'll highlight some alarming statistics that came out of Sunday's game, specifically at inside linebacker, here on today's episode of the show.
This episode of Locked On Broncos is brought to you by Mazda. Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. Mazda delivers confidence with every ride, with more IIHS Top Safety Pick Plus awards than anyone else as of August 2025. And you can make everyday drives feel like anything but, from smooth handling to intuitive controls. And with all-wheel drive standard in every crossover SUV, you can drive with confidence through almost any season. Like our players, we sweat every detail, because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda, move and be moved. Today's show is also brought to you by Monarch Money. Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's a 401k, properties, investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there is Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or on your phone. And Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. I linked all my accounts to Monarch, immediately spotted some subscriptions that I wasn't even using. Canceling those alone saved me money every single month. So don't let financial opportunity slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONNFL. You can't spell the word liability without the letters LB, and that's exactly what the Denver Broncos linebackers were in week 2 against the Indianapolis Colts, an unfortunate liability in coverage. What do the Broncos do about it? Should they bench Alex Singleton? We're going to discuss on today's episode, Locked On Broncos. But Broncos Country, want to say quickly, thank you so much to all of you that make us your first listen of the day every single day. If you haven't already done so, we really appreciate if you hit subscribe and join the Locked On Broncos community wherever you listen to podcasts and on YouTube. Cody, let's talk about this. The liability that was the Denver Broncos linebackers, especially in coverage against the Indianapolis Colts. We talked about it in the lead up to this Colts game that, man, they got a lot of playmakers out there. They've got a lot of guys that can beat you, whether it's at wide receiver, running back, obviously their new tight end, Tyler Warren, Shane Steichen, very, very good play caller. So part of this is just kind of you throw up your hands and you're like, man, yeah, we got beat by a really good unit there. But also, these are the guys that you're trusting to start. These are the guys that it's the early part of the season. You're building a foundation. They just got dog walked for 473 yards of total offense. And like you mentioned to me before we started recording the show, 9.8 yards on every first down play for the Colts in this game. I mean, there's a lot of dirty hands, but let's talk about the linebackers here for a minute.
Yeah, it was very staggering and alarming to hear Sean Payton tell us that, that Colts offense, 9.8 yards per play on first down. I mean, that really pushed you in a bind on second down, and it changes what you can do on third down. Just a lot of busted coverages, missed assignments. And I can't help I was going through my all 22, and on NFL Pro, you can see like all the plays. I was alarmed at the amount of 10-plus yard plays the Broncos allowed in this game. And it came on first down, it came on second down, came on third down. But specifically, we definitely have to talk about where the big explosives came from. And primarily, that was from the linebacker position. Now, I'll say after going back and watching the film, I don't think Justin Sternad had a bad game at all. I think there was one play where they got a dump out to Tyler Warren where he over pursued it and he cut back inside. Alex Singleton then missed the next tackle there. I'd say that's like the one negative mark in coverage for Sternad. But you go back to Singleton on that one play where they brought Warren into the backfield and they released him through one of the gaps up the field vertically. Alex Singleton didn't recognize that, tried to pass it off to Sternad, but Sternad was in man coverage against the running back. So who are you passing coverage off to? And then it leads to that big downfield play right there. And then I think everyone wants to talk about the Jonathan Taylor play there where Singleton gets caught underneath here. Part of me also wonders this as well. That's a tough play for Singleton to make, and I'm not making any excuses for him in any way, shape, or form. I think sometimes the Broncos defense has strict rules because if you're locking up, you're sending pressure from somewhere. Singleton has to get underneath. Not only, look, you have Tyler Warren, you have the tight end in line, you have a wide receiver with condensed splits closer to the line of scrimmage. Your man coverage. So Pat's playing man on the wide receiver. Brandon Jones playing man on the tight end, and now you're swinging the tailback out. It was the perfect call from Shane Steichen. But in my head, I'm thinking, why can't you have a combo call between the corner and the safety? Hey, if the tailback comes out, Brandon, you take the tailback. Singleton will take the tight end, though still, even if Singleton takes the tight end, I'm not confident in a one-on-one in that situation here. I think it's a very valid thing to kind of bring up here, Sayre, because I think we forget, because of the injury to Dre Greenlaw, because of the injury here to Drew Sanders, we forget that coming into training camp, Singleton wasn't necessarily being gifted the starting job. He was going to compete with Sternad and obviously Drew Sanders for the starting job here, whereas now it just kind of got handed to him in a sense. I just think coming off the ACL, he wasn't necessarily the fastest guy to begin with. He's a hell of a player, has a lot of heart to him. But if it's going to be where the Broncos are getting picked on in this specific position on a week-to-week basis, something has to change.
And what is that something, right? That's the question, because I know a lot of fans are asking both of us, should Alex Singleton be benched? And I think the only player that you could realistically bench him for is Karene Reed, right? That is exactly. That's the only guy that's currently also on the depth besides Garrett Wallow, who, I mean, he was activated this past week. Lavelle Bailey, those are practice squad guys. So I don't know what the Broncos are going to do in terms of, hey, do you just continue to stick with it? Like, if he continues to struggle, how long is the leash there? You know, we know Alex Singleton is tough. We know he's a physical dude. We know that he can attack the line of scrimmage. Although I will say, part of the problem against the Colts was also the second level of defense getting blown out of the way by the Colts O-line, getting to the second level and not being able to shed blocks, right? I mean, that was another part of the problem. You could tell me if you saw that on film review as well, but interesting stat here from Luka Evans, Cody, when those two linebackers were the closest targets on a combined 6 plays against the Colts, according to Pro Football Focus, 6 of 6 for 126 yards. I mean, even if Sternad is absolved of some of these, it's too much. It's too much from either one of these guys. And so when you're talking about linebackers and pass coverage, you're not going to have many linebackers in the league that can cover Jonathan Taylor. But can you be in the right position? Absolutely. When he gets a full head of steam, though, he's running 21, 22 miles per hour, whatever it was on the next gen stats GPS. Not Alex Singleton's going to look like Rich Eisen running a 40-yard dash by comparison to a guy that's running 22 miles per hour. That's just the way that's most linebackers. That's not just Singleton, but it's just, are you in the right position? That was far too often not the case against the Colts.
And can you identify the right matchups, right? Can you put yourself in a position where even if the offense does something to move guys around, can you at least be in a favorable situation to where you can adjust? And look, it's tough. It's very tough in today's age because primarily Broncos linebackers, they will have man coverage responsibility 9 times out of 10 on a running back. When you're man aligned, whether you're in shotgun or whether, you even have a pistol formation, like for example, if Alex Singleton is a left side linebacker and that running back swings out to the left side towards his left side, he's got man on him. If he swings out to the right, it's going to be Justin Sternad there. So a lot of it is, and I think the Colts did a good job of this too, on that one specifically, he was on the opposite side of Singleton. They brought him back underneath, and that's obviously a tough play to make, but I can't help but think to myself, when Dre Greenlaw returns, hopefully it's this week, when Dre Greenlaw returns, do you look at a situation where you platoon at this position? Do you go Sternad, Greenlaw as your 2 primaries and maybe rotate Singleton in on certain situations, like maybe early downs or something like that? I don't know. I think that you can use all these guys and certainly have to find a way to do just that. But the Chargers are coming up this week, Sayre. And that, to me, what was the biggest issue last year in that matchup? Middle of the field. And that is, I think, something that if you're Justin Herbert, you're Jim Harbaugh, you're looking at this matchup saying, all right, we're going to go at number 49 here. That is something that the Broncos simply can't have be dictated on them on a week-to-week basis.
No, they can't, because like we talked about, I mean, the Colts averaging 9.8 yards per first down play. That really doesn't allow you to platoon on the early downs, does it? Because if you're giving up that much on first down, it doesn't matter who's out there on the field. I mean, so you've got to make sure that, okay, if you're putting Alex Singleton out there on the early downs, if you have to make an adjustment over the course of a game, then make the adjustment, right? Go out and put somebody else out there. Put put Karene Reed out there. I don't know. It can't be any worse than that. I mean, how many teams had a worse number than that on first down plays this week? I'd be interested to know, Cody, defensively, if any other units allowed worse on first down plays, because that's pathetic. This defense should be embarrassed with the way they played. It's worse watching it back. It's worse thinking about it and rehashing it all. So yeah, whatever adjustments have to be made, the Broncos have to be willing to do it, even if it means putting Singleton on the sidelines in certain situations.
What's frustrating about this game is going back and watching the film. The offense, I mean, they did everything that they should have to win this game. Yes, they made a few mistakes, but they're not the reason they lost this game. It was because of the big plays that the defense gave up, some special teams errors here. Defensively, they're going to have to prove there's going to be a sense of urgency. Even with Joe Burrow out in week 3 on Monday Night Football, Jake Browning can still operate that offense, and they still have those talented playmakers there in Cincinnati. Then you play the Philadelphia Eagles, who, got the best of the Kansas City Chiefs in a Super Bowl rematch here in week 2. It doesn't get easier here for this Broncos team, and this defense needs to find a way to identify that and move on quickly here. But there were some questions at the end of the game here for the Broncos, including some timeout decisions by Sean Payton. Sean Payton fell on the sword in his Monday conference call, and some of the end-of-game stuff is the concern for you, though, Broncos country. We'll share our thoughts here on today's episode, Locked On Broncos.
Today's episode of Locked On Broncos is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season is finally here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love using FanDuel because it fits however you like to bet, right? Whether it's player props, building a same-game parlay, or even jumping in live as the action unfolds. It's quick, it's easy, and it's the best way to add a little more energy to Sunday. So, are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet.
What happened late in the Broncos' loss against the Indianapolis Colts? Well, you go back to the field goal, you go back to the penalty. There was a lot that Sean Payton says after the game he wishes he would have done differently here in hindsight after being able to watch the film. Broncos country, all the everydayers, first listeners, thank you once again for tuning in and making the show exactly what it was. We continue some of our mailbag questions here and some deeper dives here into what happened here. I think the one thing with Sean Payton, at least through the 2 weeks, you look at how the offense performed in week 1. He kind of fell on the sword for Bo Nix and said, I could have been better as a play caller. Week 2, you have the special teams gaffe, and he says that's not on Darren Rizzi, that's not on Dondre Tillman. He says that's on me. I found that to be very interesting here because really in that situation, Sayre, and I think looking back on it in hindsight, it makes sense. You want an ultra-aggressive field goal block attempt, maybe if it's a gimme field goal, right? We're talking 35 to 45 yards here, something that's a little bit more of a gimme for any field goal kicker in today's NFL. And he says for a 60-yarder, we just needed to play that straight up. We didn't have to do anything exotic. And he said, that's on me as a head coach. Your thoughts on Sean kind of taking the blame here, kind of 2 weeks in a row for some of the issues that have hurt the Broncos here early on?
Well, I think it's just his leadership coming out, Cody. Obviously, you want the head coach to be willing to take the blame for certain things, anything that goes wrong within the course of a game, because everything comes into question when you lose, right? When you lose, you look back in hindsight, everybody's asking, well, should you have taken those timeouts when you did? Well, should you have thrown the ball on this down? I mean, everything is questioned unless it works, right? If you throw the ball in a 3rd and short situation and the receiver catches it for a first down, everybody's like, wow, what a genius play call. If the ball hits the ground, it's a terrible play call, and Sean Payton should be replaced by Davis Webb. So everything is questioned in hindsight. I will say, I think that you and I both agreed after the game that, man, that 60-yard field goal attempt is going to be hard for any kicker in the league. Maybe not for the Cowboys kicker. I mean, that guy's pretty special. But for anybody else, a 60-yard field goal, you kind of are just saying, hey, this is less than a coin flip chance of going in. Like, we've got pretty good odds here. Even if he's just straight up, even if we're not even on the field, there's a chance he ain't making this kick. So all you got to do is throw your hands up in the air. You might even have blocked it that way. Just throwing your hands up in the air with like a 6'6" D lineman, Uwazurike. He did that a couple of times at Iowa State. So I just think that that's the thing with, he's right. It shouldn't have been unless it was a shorter field goal that you get super aggressive. Obviously, you want to go win the game. You don't. But then again, Cody, here's what happens. The Colts kicker drains it from 60 yards out. All you did was stick your hands up in the air, and everybody's like, why didn't you try to block the kick? So I think that's just how things go in today's NFL. You win some, you lose some. I like that Sean, didn't disagree with the call, because eventually I feel like that's something that could benefit the Broncos if the league is paying more close attention to that.
Yeah, and I mean, I also hate the idea that it ever became a rule that you can't use leverage anymore. Like Justin Simmons did it perfectly. Nowadays, there's certain limitations to what you can do. Like once the ball snapped, like you can push the guy down, but you can't launch yourself off the ground by pushing him down. To me, it's like there's so many moving pieces. Why do we have to overcomplicate it? Like go through and just, if you want to jump over the guy, you want to send a safety to jump over the front man, let him do it. I think it's stupid to throw a flag on it. But then again, that's just the integrity of the game that the NFL so happens to talk about on a week-to-week basis. It was the right call by definition. Frustrating, but you know what? You shouldn't have been in that position to begin with, honestly. And, ultimately that's going to define the early part of the season. But you have to now, as we said, the proverbial pity potty. You got to flush it. You got to move on. There's a lot of things to correct here. I think overall, I came away with the Broncos offensive tape. I liked what I saw from them. There's a lot of great things that they could build on. The offensive line played a hell of a game, in my opinion, but it's not going to get talked about because of all these blunders of what happened. But now you have to shift your focus to the Los Angeles Chargers here. Let's get to a mailbag question here as well from Embo Merrick on YouTube. He asked the question, do you agree with how the timeouts were used? Honestly, Sarah, I didn't find too much of an issue with it. I understand it. Like you get a stop defensively, and let's say you don't allow them to convert for a first down. Then it looks like a genius move. Fortunately, there was defense didn't get any stops, and that obviously led to like, okay, now you don't really have much leverage at this point. I didn't find really much of an issue with it.
Yeah, I think that was kind of the right way to go about it, actually. When you watch it back, I mean, you got basically a 50-50 shot there on that play to Alec Pierce with Pat Surtain in coverage, and ultimately Pat just got caught a little too far behind in the trail technique, right? I mean, when he's playing Alec Pierce there, so great throw, great catch. I mean, you just bank on your guys making a play in that situation, even if it is short yardage. So the Colts, they just made one more play than the Broncos could afford with the timeouts they had. And so it's, again, one of those things where I think we want to go back to certain landmark points and blame stuff. I think if we want to blame anything, blame J.K. Dobbins spiking the ball after his first down run. Blame the face mask on the very next play. Blame Will Lutz for the missed field goal. Like, those are the legitimate things that you can blame for the loss in this game. Blame 473 yards of total offense. Let's not talk about timeouts at the end of game. I mean, when your defense couldn't stop a nosebleed all afternoon, it's just that stuff is way harder to stomach than the idea that you didn't manage your timeouts well at the end of a game when you want to preserve as much clock as you possibly can. Because, yeah, the Colts, hey, let's say you stop them, they're going to kick it or they're going to go for it. Then all of a sudden you've got an opportunity to do something with the ball there if they make a kick or whatever it may be. So I don't like the questioning always, Cody. I think sometimes it's worth discussing. But yeah, when it comes to the timeouts there at the end of game, I think that was way more reasonable than what we saw from, like you mentioned earlier, the Courtland Sutton stuff in this game. I mean, the Broncos did not get their number one receiver very involved at all. And after getting Marvin Mims involved, didn't get him more targets. So it's really that stuff to me is way more the stuff that I would point to as the landmarks in this one.
Yeah, and that question obviously comes in from Daniel on YouTube about Sutton's usage. I mean, Troy Franklin had 48 offensive snaps in Sunday's game. Cortland had 45, so 3 less snaps than Troy, which love to see the volume here for Troy. We'd like to see more targets and more on-field snaps for Evan Engram, Marvin Mims, Pat Bryant. Like, you have all these guys that can contribute, and I understand with different personnel packages, more tight end usage. Adam Troutman seeing a lot of time on the field because of his blocking ability. I understand that. I get it. But I think you have some playmakers at wide receiver that simply can make a bigger difference in certain areas of the game as it unfolds and as it develops, especially with Marvin Mims. But Cortland, I'd say like for Cortland, he's seeing a lot of different types of coverage looks here where he's being bracketed, whether, it's a corner playing outside leverage against him. They have a safety over the top. If it's not a safety, it's a corner and an inside linebacker dropping back and just kind of keeping an eye on if he's running a drag route or a crossing pattern here. And so they're really trying to take away Bo Nix's easy button, Cortland Sutton. And that's why you have other guys emerging like Troy Franklin, which is great. But Can you get your other easy button going with Evan Engram, with Marvin Mims, with Pat Bryant? Like, Denver has a solution here. If you take away our easy button, guess what? We got another one. We're going to go to this guy. You try to take that guy away, we're going to go here. Denver has diverse weapons that they can use. Sean's just got to get to the point where he finds a way to go to these guys effectively. And I think that's something that you need to work out sooner rather than later.
100%. And it comes down to those situational moments as well. Third downs, red zone. I mean, obviously the offense played way better in week 2 than we saw in week 1. We saw a lot of positive signs from them, just a couple of mistakes at the wrong moments, right? Sean Payton talked about them getting in their own way, but again, that probably should have never happened. Probably should have never been the case because the defense needs to go out there and get a stop. So the big question that I'm going to have for this week going forward, Cody, is can the Broncos play complementary football at the perfect time now? Because you've got a chance to bounce back, but not just bounce back against a division rival, against the Chargers, who beat you twice last year. But they looked really good in week 1. And if that team comes out in week 3 against Denver, they're spreading the ball around. This defense, they've got to be ready. So we need to bounce back in a big way from that unit here in week 3.
I agree with you, Sayre. And Broncos Country, we appreciate you so much for rocking with us, making us your first listen every day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. For all you everydayers out there, tomorrow, Sayre and I, we're going to sit down and we're also going to preview some of the bigger storylines. Could Dre Greenlaw make his debut for the Broncos this week against the Chargers? We'll go through what that would look like and more on tomorrow's episode, Locked On Broncos.